Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we are out here by the Big Head River, and I'm actually sitting, you can see, right on the riverbed here. Obviously in the springtime where I am would be covered in water, but this time of year, this is, getting toward the end of July, there's not a whole lot of water here. I'm hoping that our audio won't be affected too much by the water. I've tried to go to a place where, it's kind of a little quieter. Anyway, I want to have a discussion with you guys that should be a lot of fun. This is one that's been, attempted, I guess, by just about every knife channel out there. And so I'm going to add my voice to the fray, if you will. We're going to talk about survival knives, what makes a good survival knife, what I look for in a survival knife, and hopefully you'll get some value out of this. If nothing else, I would love to hear your comments as well. So down below in the comments, go ahead and put what you think of as a good survival knife. And at the end of this video, I'm going to have a little bit of a discussion, to imagine a true survival situation in which, you're jumping out of a helicopter, you're dropped off by a hot air balloon in the middle of nowhere, and what blades would you want to bring with you? Okay, the only limitation, I guess, is going to be this is going to be something you're going to have to carry on your back. You're going to, imagine you're parachuting in or something. So you can't say, hey, I want a camping trailer. Okay. So I would love to hear that discussion down below. Now let's pan down here with the camera and take a look at some of the knives I've brought that I hope will serve to facilitate our conversation, beginning with what do we mean when we use the term survival knife? All right. And I think, on the face of it, you could say, well, that's just the knife that could help you survive. And so that would mean whatever situation you're in, and that's going to be, you could imagine all kinds of scenarios where survival is a problem. If you're in a car accident, you may want a tool to help you survive, but that's not what we have in mind. Most of the time when people talk about a survival knife, they mean the kind of knife that could help them survive in a wilderness type of scenario. All right. And furthermore, I think we use that term survival knife sort of the way we use the term zombie apocalypse. Okay, when we talk about the zombie apocalypse, what we really mean is a situation where you're kind of totally on your own fending for yourself. Well, when we use the term survival knife, we kind of mean a knife that can do everything that you would need to do to keep yourself alive. Okay, so it's going to be a decent slicer. It's got to be able to maybe chop a little bit. It's got to be able to prepare firewood. It's got to do a lot of different jobs. Okay, now we'll talk about the one tool option a little bit lower or a little bit later in the video. I don't know why I said lower, but I guess maybe because it's lower down on my page of notes here. Anyway, we'll talk about that coming up a little bit. You can see I have a couple of different examples of things that I feel like are extremely handy, such as a hatchet and a Gomboy folding saw over there. So we'll bring that into our discussion in a couple of minutes. But for now, I think what we mean by a survival knife is a survival knife that can kind of be, a knife that can be a jack of all trades. You don't want a knife that's just meant for stabbing. You don't want a knife that's purely meant for tactical or fighting purposes. You want a knife that can do just about everything. And the SC6 is a great example because it's got that nice thin blade that can slice reasonably well. It's thick enough blade stock that it can really do a lot of damage in terms of batoning. You could do some light chopping with this, although it's a little light for that. And it's a flat ground blade, making it a nice balance between toughness and durability. Toughness and cutting power. Okay, so the SC serves as a good example. The GSO, I believe, is another good example, and we could have a debate about this for sure, but we do have 20 CV steel here. We have a saber ground blade rather than a full flat grind, and that's to increase toughness. We've got fairly thick stock, similar stock thickness to the SE there, but again, this is a knife that's meant to be able to do a lot of things reasonably well rather than, one thing exclusively. So let's carry on with our conversation, having looked at a couple of those examples. And actually, before we go on, let's take a quick look at the machete here. This is a popular thing right now. Lots of people are looking at and reviewing these large, heavy style choppers. This is, of course, the Kershaw Camp 18. It's a really, really nice tool, but it has a specific role that probably wouldn't work as a survival knife I mean, if you really were in a dire situation, would I rather have this than, you know, a kick in the ass? Well, sure, of course I would. But if I was able to pick, this would not be sort of the top of my list, right? Okay, so, and that's because it's specially built. And we've been saying a survival knife is supposed to be sort of a jack of all trades, and rather than something that's specifically built for a particular role. So now that we've kind of talked about that, let's get into that one tool option, okay? So lots of times when we talk about a survival knife, we talk about a one tool option. That is one knife that can do all the jobs we need to do in the bush. And I have to tell you guys, if I'm honest, I don't love this idea. And if I'm given a choice, okay, if I'm preparing to go out in the bush, or I'm going camping with my boys or on a hike, a lot of times when we call it a hike, but we end up going out to the bush and playing and fooling around and making a fire and doing a few other things. So, but in a scenario like that, where I'm going out to the bush, I'm not gonna bring one tool, okay? It doesn't make any sense. I would bring probably a hatchet and a folding saw and, you know, maybe a small fixed blade or possibly even a folding knife. Works really well. I have brought just a folding knife. I have brought just a hatchet. I have brought just a large chopper, you know, especially when I'm getting ready for a review. But generally, I'm going to bring a few different things. And that's, I think that makes the most sense, okay? Generally speaking, you know, if I have to get firewood ready, can this do the job? Yes. Can I do some batoning with it? Can I even do maybe some light chopping with it? Yeah, sure I can. But is it going to be efficient? Absolutely not. If I've got to prepare a reasonable amount of firewood, let's say I'm camping for, you know, a day and a half, and I need wood to last me overnight, I'm going to use a hatchet at the very least, and probably going to use an axe, and I'm going to combine that with the folding saw, right? Because those tools are going to provide me the most amount of wood with the least amount of effort, all right? And that's really what I think you ought to be looking for. So I'm not a big fan of the one tool option, and I'm not really a fan of knife designers who try to make a knife that can do everything, because it always ends up, you know, one, it may end up sucking at everything, and often that happens, but it ends up, you know, making just too many compromises most of the time. All right, now, you know, I do like some versatility, and I was talking about the Essie a second ago as being a highly versatile knife. The same with the GSO, sort of the Survive knives there. Same with the Tops Idaho Hunter here. You know, this is a knife. Can it do a lot of things? Could I do some batoning with this? Could I skin an animal? Could I, you know, prepare fire sticks? Yeah, I can do all that stuff with this knife, and it's going to actually do it pretty darn well. So let's put that back down. So I believe in some versatility. Even in my folders, I like some versatility. Like, I like a knife that, you know, I could carry in the office, or, you know, around town, or even out in the forest. All right. By the way, I am going to do a video in the not too distant future called Folders in the Forest, where I recommend which, if I was going to go out in the bush with a folder, which ones would I take? I'd love to hear your recommendations for that down below as well. Now that I've asked you like 3 or 4 different questions for the comments, try to clarify which one you're referring to, so that everyone else reading knows what we're talking about when we start getting into that discussion. So yeah, one tool option is not my favorite thing. I would prefer to bring a specific tool for the specific jobs that I want, within reason, okay? Like a hatchet, a folding saw, and a fixed blade. I don't think that's unbearable or too difficult to carry or too heavy. So that would be sort of my thinking on the one tool option. If I had to take a knife that was going to be a one tool thing, I would probably lean more towards something that could do slicing and cutting, and may not be that great for batoning. I would rather figure out another way of dealing with wood. Either I would only use, you know, if I had the Essie, let's say, I wouldn't baton through anything bigger than 2.5 inches with that. And so, you know, if that was my situation, I would, you know, I would use deadfall, and I wouldn't even bother cutting it. I'd just drag it to my fire and start one end and slide it into the fire as the day went on. And so, you know, you have some options that you don't need that knife that can chop down a tree and then, you know, also go ahead and baton through that wood and make kindling and go through all of that. I just don't think it's a very efficient way of doing it. All right, so what about the next survival knife topic, okay? The knife you have on you, that's your survival knife. And in the first sense of survival, okay, we talked about this, the basic definition of a survival knife is as a knife that can help you survive in some scenario, whatever that is. You know, whether you're attacked by ninjas flying out of trees, whether, you know, you go through a time machine and are dropped in, you know, medieval England, whatever random crazy scenario, the zombie apocalypse, or, you know, a mass flood or an earthquake, or who knows, right? Obviously, the knife you have on you then is going to be your survival knife. But you know, 99.9% of the time, that's not the situation we're in. We're in a situation where we kind of know what's going to happen. You know, for example, if I'm driving to work, I only live like 2 kilometers from my job. So what are the chances that I'm going to get in a true survival situation on the way to or from work? And the chances are 0. Okay, and not in the sense of needing a knife. Okay, I've got a first aid kit, so if I got in a car accident, I've got a first aid kit. I've got a couple of ways to get out of my car if I was trapped. Okay, so, you know, that's maybe a feasible survival situation. But am I going to start, for example, carrying an SE6 every day, saying, you know, who knows, what if, you know, the car gets picked up in a tornado and I'm dropped in the Arctic and the tundra? Well, no, I know that's not going to happen, right? So I don't really buy into the you must carry a survival capable knife at every moment because the knife you have on you is the knife you're going to need to survive. Well, most of us are able to exercise enough control over our daily routines that is not a feasible scenario, right? You know, whether you're going to the office or whether you're going camping, you know, if you're on a long drive, whether that drive is going to be through a city or through the countryside, you know, so you can plan ahead based on what your potential needs are going to be on any given day. All right, and because of that, I don't really buy into it's the knife you have on you, therefore you better carry a survival capable knife at every moment, okay? Now, do I want to, you know, let's go to the other side of that equation. Do I want to carry a capable knife at all times? Yes, I do. You know, so I carry a lot of times something that falls into this category. It's over 3.5 inches or 3.5 inches or more. It's got a good, comfortable handle. It's got a really tough lock. It can do a whole lot, and you really could do an awful lot with the Ultimate Hunter. It is a great knife when it comes to versatility, and yes, I absolutely value versatility in my folders. I wouldn't argue with that for a second. However, there are times when I don't carry something like this. You know, when I'm going to church, I often don't carry a knife that's as substantial as this. If I'm, you know, going on a date or something like that, and sometimes I like to carry something, you know, a little bit fancy, a little bit dressy. So, you know, and I wouldn't try to argue for a second that a lot of those dressier, fancier knives are going to be as hard use. All right, they really aren't. So, you know, I think we need to kind of consider what our scenario is. For me, you know, if I'm going camping or hiking, or if I'm flying on a bush plane across, you know, the middle of nowhere, well, yeah, I'm going to carry a particular knife for that role. If I'm special forces and I'm being dropped behind enemy lines, I'm going to carry a particular knife for that role. If I'm, you know, working with the fire department and I'm going to a wildland fire, I might put a hatchet in my pack. I may put this large chopper in my gear. You know, if I'm going into a house fire, I don't want this, right? It's a different scenario and therefore requires different tools. So carry the knife that can do what you're likely to encounter, okay? That can deal with the situation that you're likely to find yourself in. Let's now talk about steel. As I said, I'm trying to get into all the debates here. What is the best steel for a survival knife? And again, I feel like there are a lot of different options that depend on what you're planning to do with that knife. Do I like 1095 and the carbon steels? Absolutely. No, they don't hold an edge as well, but they're much easier to sharpen. Do I like, you know, higher end, you know, stainless steels? You know, let's grab the GSO here for a second. So, you know, this would put a lot of people off because it's in 20 CV. Right? Well, guess what? I love 20 CV, and the difference between you know, the 1095 in an SE and the 20 CV in the GSO is that, you know, I have different expectations of the two steels. This, when I put a good edge on it, I know that that edge is going to stick around for a really, really long time. Sorry, my camera is going crazy trying to focus here. But I know that the edge on this is going to stick around for a long time. I know this one isn't going to stick around as long. So if I'm carrying this knife, I'm going to make sure that I have a way to sharpen it with me. And I normally carry one of those little Work Sharp travel sharpeners. They tend to work pretty well for me. If I've got this knife though, and depending on how long I'm going to go, you know, if I'm going to be in the bush for 2 days or 3 days maybe, I may not carry a sharpener at all, or if I do, it's going to be more of a stropping setup because I know that this edge is going to stick around, and you know, whatever where it does get, I can bring it back pretty easily with a strop. Okay, so to me, the steel, you need to give it some consideration. You don't want just a giant piece of junk for your steel, but outside of that, you need to, once again, think through your situation. Are you bringing a knife because, are you going to pick your knife steel knowing that you're going to sharpen it in the field and wanting something maybe a little more springy, a little less likely to break? Or are you going to pick your knife steel based on edge retention and, you know, and how stainless it is, the way we would normally pick folding knife steel, and then use it accordingly? Okay, so that's how I feel about knife steel. I think there's lots of great steels: 20CV, S35VN, 3V, 1095, S30V, D2. Like, there's lots of great steels, and if you know a little bit about the steel you're using, you'll be fine with whatever one, right? If you're using a steel that's a little harder, well, yeah, you don't want to do things that are going to break it. If you're using steel that's a little softer, then you'll have to be pay a little more attention to, you know, maintaining that edge, right? That's really all there is to it. Now, I do want to talk about, since we've got a few knives out here, and since this is often something that comes up in discussions of survival knives, what about batoning with a knife? And let's switch knives. We've been looking at the GSO for long enough. It is really pretty, but we haven't looked at the Idaho Hunter as much. So let's get out the Idaho Hunter and use it as an example. Now, this has got big, thick, heavy blade stock. It is very unlikely to break. It's a flat grind. Can I do some batoning with this? Yes, I have no question that I can. However, I would not try to baton something that is this wide, okay? In fact, even if, and this is actually one of the reasons I brought this, even if I had the Kershaw Camp 18 here, right? I wouldn't try to baton a 7 or 8 inch log. It's just going to be an exercise in futility, right? I'm going to work so hard. I'm going to run the risk of bending that blade. By the time and then I've only got one log broken down, right? What a huge waste of time. Instead, when I'm batoning with a knife, and as I said, I don't have a problem batoning with a knife, but when I'm doing it, I do it within reason. So I would probably, even if I had, you know, my BK9 or something like this, I'm not going to be batoning anything more than, you know, 3 inches across or so. All right, and actually, you know, a log that's 3 inches across, that's going to be my go-to in a, you know, I've hiked into the bush situation. When I'm out here with my kids, that's what I look for. I look for logs that are around 3 inches across, and I use those because I just find I can get a lot of firewood out of that kind of size, or smaller. All right, that's how I would do it. If I'm going to process larger wood, I'm going to bring an axe. I may bring, you know, a large saw, even a 2-man saw. Then I know I can process some major amounts of wood, and maybe that would be, you know, I'm building a structure or something like that. And if I was going to build a survival shelter outside, I would almost certainly bring an axe. All right, it doesn't have to be a huge axe, but I would definitely want an axe. So that's how I'm kind of thinking about should you baton with a knife? Well, yeah, of course, batoning with a knife is fine as long as you use your head, right? Don't don't say, look, man, this blade is 15 inches long, so I should be able to baton a log that's 14 inches across, okay? That's foolishness. And if you've ever actually tried it, and I have for testing purposes, you know, I've used my SE a few times for a log where it's like this much of the blade is sticking out on each side, right? I've used almost the whole thing, and it'll do it, but it really sucks. It's not fun. It's not something I'm gonna wanna do in a survival situation because of the potential for, one, breaking the knife, two, getting it stuck in there, or hurting myself, or just wearing myself out doing it, okay? Finally, I will say this, I didn't mention this, but you'll notice that all the knives I brought have an exposed tang. I feel like that's important for a survival knife, all right? Knives that have, you know, a good example, I don't have it with me, but is the the Cold Steel SRK. As I say, I don't have it with me, but the rubberized handle covers the end of the tang. It's still technically a full tang knife, but the tang is covered. I don't like that. I want to see that tang sticking out for a few different reasons. Whether I need to, you know, bash on something with this, or whether I want to, you know, I have done before where I'll use the point of my knife and tap it into a log so that I can set this up for you know, using in this configuration. I'm sure you've seen this done, or maybe you've done it yourself, where if you're doing sort of a whittling type task, you can stab your knife into a log, pound it in a little bit, and then use the knife and rub the wood along this way. That works really well, but it doesn't work that well if you don't have an exposed tang to pound on just a little, okay? So we're pretty well done with, you know, most of the things that I think about when I think about a survival knife. And I know I haven't, you know, followed a conventional line in this video and argued for one particular thing or not. What I'm trying to argue for is use your head and make decisions based on a little bit of logic being applied to the situation, and plan ahead a little bit so that you've got the tool that's appropriate for whatever it is that you need to be doing, okay? Now, if I was dropped out of a helicopter, and again, I'd love to have you guys comment down below, if I was dropped out of a helicopter into the bush, what knife or knives would I want to have? I would absolutely want some kind of a hatchet, probably more likely an axe. I would carry, you know, some kind of medium fixed blade, something like this size or the size of the Idaho Hunter there that we've been looking at, and I would carry a folding saw, probably again a folding saw around this size. I've tried a few others and I think this size works really nice in terms of, you know, being easy to carry and really useful and long enough that you can get a lot of use out of it. So those are the blades I would carry, and then of course I'd want my other survival stuff, you know, for water and fire and shelter and all that, but that's a different discussion for a different day. Thanks for watching. Go ahead and hit that notification button, like and subscribe, and share this video. I'd love to hear your comments down below. What would you carry if you were going to be out in the bush, and what are your thoughts on some of these various subjects we've covered under you know, the whole survival knife debate. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.